I was debt free. Okay, now everything gets better. Your life is exponentially improved. The world is perfect. You're set for life, right? Not so much, you guys. When I paid off that debt, that was the beginning of me just starting from zero. You're listening to Nurses on Fire, the podcast for nurses by nurses aspiring to financial independence. I'm your host, Naseema McElroy of Financially Intentional. Let's spark some flames, y'all. Welcome back to episode 11 of the Nurses on Fire podcast. If this is your first time listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I'd be eternally grateful if you took a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share with other nurses that you feel could benefit. When you post that review, please make sure to take a screenshot and send it to Naseema at financiallyintentional.com. So here are some money wins from the Nurses on Fire Facebook group. So my Lynn's husband got a sizable bonus, which she is going to put towards her kids' college fund or towards a new house. If she were to put it towards her new house, she would be able to save 18% of her income, not including maxing out both her 401ks, assuming that they can rent the old house to cover the mortgage, which in Northern California, I'm quite sure you could, boo. Aaron, who I'm like super juiced about, bought a condo as an investment property and had it rented even before it closed. That is phenomenal, girl. Keep the fire blazing. Miss Nikisha, PhD, from episode 5 of Nurses on Fire podcast, opened a new practice from scratch. This woman never ceases to amaze me. And check this out, you guys. It is a cash practice. More money, more money, more money. You guys, thank you so much for sharing your financial wins. When you win, we all win it as a community. So keep them coming. So in this episode, it's just going to be me, y'all, bringing you up to date with what's been going on in my world since I paid off my massive amount of debt. I'm sharing some pretty personal details about my life, and I'm talking just like I would talk to one of my good girlfriends. So I didn't really script things out, and I kind of just sat down and let things flow. So things aren't always in sequential order, and I have some word blunders like I just did. So you guys, not everybody's going to like this episode, but you know, I cannot be for everyone, and those who are going to get it are going to get it, and that's who it's for. So, you know, I appreciate each and every one of you guys, but I know I can't make everybody happy, and that's okay with me. But I do share some pretty intimate details of my life in this episode. And so if you have some feedback or some further questions, the best way to get in contact with me would be to ask a question in the Nurses on Fire Facebook group, or to leave a comment on the corresponding blog page at financiallyintentional.com/nursesonfire/11. And without further ado, this nurse is living her best life, kinda, with yours truly. Hey, so on this week's episode, you guys, I got a special treat. It's just going to be you and me. And I'm going to take some time to give you a little insight in my life and what's going on right now, and to update you from where I left off, which is, you just know that I paid off $1 million in debt. If you follow me on Instagram, you might know I have 2 kids. Other than that, I haven't really talked about myself and what's been going on for these last few years after I paid off this debt. All right, so I'm going to start back at October of 2017, that's when I sold my house and paid off the last of my debt. At that point, I had about $50,000, $30,000 from my divorce, and $20,000 left on my student loans. And I was debt free. Okay, now everything gets better. Your life is exponentially improved. The world is perfect. You're set for life, right? Not so much, you guys. When I paid off that debt, that was the beginning of me just starting from zero. I was just at zero at that point. So I want to talk to you about some of the things that I did when I paid off all that debt. So I did a lot of investing in myself. I invested in growing financially intentional. I hired a life coach. I joined Wealth Building Mastermind with Hillary Hendershot. And something that I did, which people in the community might frown upon, is I brought a brand new Tesla Model X. And oh my God, gas sigh. Oh my God, she is so extravagant. No, you guys, this is something that I really, really wanted. I am kind of a nerd and I like gadgets and I love SUVs. I had 3 Lexus RXs beforehand, and that was like the only car that I like. So there's only like one car that I like, and I had my eye on this Tesla forever. And I was just like, one day I made this promise to myself when I was going on this debt payoff journey. I was like, one day when I have enough money to buy this Tesla in cash, I am going to get it, no doubt. So when I sold my house after paying everything off, I actually had enough in the bank left over to buy the Tesla Model X in cash. And that's initially what I planned to do. But actually, after speaking to my financial advisor, they advised against it. And I ended up negotiating a 1.4% loan through my credit union to finance my Tesla. And they thought that my money could be spent in investments, which, have paid off so far. So the things that I invested in, like I said, I did coaching for my own finances. I did coaching for my business. I invested in my daughter's 401k. I opened an after-tax brokerage account for myself. I made sure that my Roth was fully funded. Everything was maxed out at work. So I made sure that all my tax advantage accounts were completely funded through the end of the year. And you might say, buying this car was ultimately not the best financial decision. And it's not. But personal finance is personal and it's not going to look the same for everyone. And I really like to practice an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset that you'll see in these communities. And that card really sparks joy in me. It speaks to me. I am very frugal in other ways, but I feel like that's something that I wanted and something that if it means that I have to work a couple more years for, I think it's totally worth it. So to each his own, but I have no regrets about my car. It's bomb, y'all. So the summer, the following year, there were a couple of things that was going on. I always had 2 jobs. So I worked at one hospital and then I had transferred to another hospital within the same organization that I had worked for when I moved back to Oakland to be closer to family. That hospital, you guys, was such a toxic work environment. Not only was I just overall stressed, I used to cry before I went into work. The patients were being treated fairly, especially African American women patients. The care there was just so subpar. I was scared that I was going to lose my license or be associated with the doctors there in any kind of malpractice suit. So I would shake anytime I had to go to work. It was horrible. Not only that, I had physical manifestations, like I had acne on my face. And if you guys know me, I have not one pimple. The only time I've ever had acne on my face was when I turned 30 and I was like really stressed out about life. Don't ask me. what was going on. But that's the only ever time I've ever had acne. Never had it as a teenager, anything, but it was just manifesting in my face. And I'm not saying that trivially, or like acne is like some minor thing. Like, this is how bad these things were manifesting. I also had a miscarriage during that time. It was horrendous. So at that point, I had a choice to make. My partner got offered a job in Nevada, in Reno, and I could stay at this job that was super duper crazy, or I can go with him to Reno and continue to work at my other job. So we decided to move to Reno, and moving to Reno was a substantial drop in cost of living. I don't ever mind sharing numbers. So in the apartment, the little small 2-bedroom apartment, 1,000 square foot apartment we were renting in downtown Oakland, we were paying about $3,600 a month. And we were able to buy a house in Reno for about $350,000. So we decided to buy in Reno because my partner was getting a contract. He's in education. So he was getting this 3-year contract to work with the administrators of the Reno school district. So I was like, okay, I could buy this house. It can, after the 3 years, will be great investment property. Even though I could have rented for a whole lot cheaper, this house was in a great community. It was on a golf course, had pools. I'm talking about 4 hours of daycare during the week included in your HOAs. It was in the best school district. It was a bomb place to live. Plus, it was right on the border to California. So I was as close to the California border as I was to downtown Reno. And so it was prime location. It was a really nice place. And so we decided to buy. And so we moved there in last summer and things were great. What I failed to mention was that right before we moved, and while I was working at this job, another reason why I decided to leave the toxic place I was working was I found out I was pregnant with my second daughter. So I went through my pregnancy there. It was high risk because, y'all, I'm old. I might look really young, but I am advanced maternal age. It was high risk. A car had backed into my car during my pregnancy, and I ended up in the emergency room and then found out that I had a huge cyst, almost that was probably bigger than the baby, on one of my ovaries. So it was even more complicated with that. Anyway, I had great delivery experience. I delivered my daughter on New Year's Eve last year. It was a phenomenal experience, but then had to deal with getting the cyst removed. And so in that process, and after having the baby, I experienced like really, really bad postpartum depression. A thing that I forgot to mention was a couple months before I was delivering my daughter, my partner's work status changed. So basically, Reno superintendent dropped the contract that they had with this consulting company that he works for. So this 3-year contract that we moved to Reno for was no longer. So he ended up staying with the company, but he had to work in Las Vegas, which is an hour flight away from Reno, or an 8-hour drive. And I worked in Fremont, California, which is an hour away from Reno, or how long is that drive? It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive, or it's a 45-minute flight, but a 4 or 5 hour drive. But anyway, that though, like our crazy commutes, my postpartum depression, me being a new mom, then I ultimately had to undergo surgery where I ultimately lost my ovary, sent me on a hormonal, basically I was really feeling bad. And we didn't have any family. It was a really hard time. And so with that and the fact that neither one of us lived in Reno, we decided to move back to Oakland so we can be closer to family. I'm known as a debt slayer because of the $200,000 in student loans I slayed in 2.5 years. I hated those loans and dealing with the loan servicers. I was head down and focused and wanted to get rid of the debt as soon as possible. Knocking out these loans and seeing a zero loan balance was one of the most liberating feelings I have ever felt. But recently I learned that by not optimizing my student loan payoff strategy, I lost money. I'm talking about big money, y'all. I could have saved $80,000 if I had a customized student loan plan by the team at Student Loan Planner. Please don't make the same mistake as me. If you have student loan debt, especially in the six figures, head over to studentloanplanner.com/financially intentional to get your customized student loan plan today. Do you know how your retirement funds are invested? Do you know how much you're paying in fees? Chances are you're on the same boat as some of my coworkers. Some of them set up their retirement when they first got hired and never looked at it again. Some have let a computer select their investments and don't even know what they're invested in. Worst of all, some people have their retirement funds sitting in a savings account and they're not even invested in the market because they're afraid to lose money. That's hella scary, y'all. What's even scarier is that some of you listening don't even have a clue what I'm talking about. And guess what? This is super common. This has to change today. Let Bloom do the work for you. Head over to financiallyintentional.com/Bloom and get your free retirement account analysis. They'll check and see if your retirement account is optimized for you, and they'll let you know if you're paying too much in fees. That's Bloom with 3 O's. Bloom can also manage your retirement account on an ongoing basis so you can take the stress out of retirement planning. If you choose to work with Bloom, their fees are incredibly low, less than your Netflix subscription. You have enough to worry about. Let Bloom handle your retirement account. The hardest thing you'll have to do when it comes to your retirement is remember that Bloom is spelled with 3 O's. Head over to financiallyintentional.com/Bloom. Remember, spelled with 3 O's, and get your retirement account squared away today. So we moved back in this summer, so the summer of 2019, so we could be close to my grandfather. My grandfather's 91. You guys know he's like my best friend. He took a major part in raising me. So we decided to move back close to him. But this time I decided that we were going to rent, and it was super duper important to me that our rent be very affordable, lower than what we can afford, and that we be able to have space that we could sublet out our extra space. So we lucked up on a house around the corner from my grandfather with a whole bottom level that the owner allowed us to sublet. The rent was already way less than what we're used to paying in this area. Plus, we're able to save almost half of our rent by subletting it. So that was a major win. Oh, one thing that I don't know why I always forget to talk about this when I share my journey of paying off that $1 million. A big part of it is, you guys know I had this big old house in the suburbs of the San Francisco Bay Area. It was a 5-bedroom, 5.5 bath house. And once I really started getting serious, I started subletting out the rooms. One of the rooms I sublet to my coworker, and so she had her own room, her own bathroom. Every room had their own bathroom, so it was actually perfect for subletting it. And then during my journey, I had at least 3 people subletting the house at the time, so that drove down my housing costs extremely low. And that's called house hacking, you guys. So I know people talk about latte factor and all this kind of stuff, and yes, those things are super duper important, but the 2 most important things you can do to drive your finances, to improve your finances, is to decrease your 2 major expenses, which are your housing costs and your transportation costs. And so I was able to drastically reduce my housing costs by house hacking then, and I'm doing it now. I also want to just put something out there for you guys who think that you can't possibly house hack. I did it, number one, as a single mom with just me and my baby, and I was completely safe. People in my house were completely trustworthy. I went through a thorough screening process, and plus one of them was my coworkers, and completely trusted her. She even helped me with my daughter, so that was a major bonus. And then now I do it with 2 little kids, and they're just fine. It works out. So stop making excuses, you guys. Anyway, back to my story. So yeah, we found this house, so our expenses were super low. But you guys, during this time, since we moved, my house in Reno was still on the market. I don't know what's going on with the Reno market, but it seemed like as soon as we decided to sell, the market slowed down. So my house was on the market 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And so not only am I paying this mortgage, I'm paying my rent here. And so it became extremely taxing. And, I went back into this mode like, I know how to get out of this. I know how to hustle. So I need to pick back up working 2 jobs. I've always worked 2 jobs my whole life. This is the first time I only had 1 job. So when I came back to Oakland, I went back to working my job. I was working 6 days a month. I went back to working full time, and full time for a nurse is 3 12s a week. Well, with this job is 3 12s a week. So I was working 3 12s a week, but I had this negative self-talk that I was super lazy. Also, when I was working 6 days a month in Reno, which I don't know if I mentioned that. I had a line item to mention that. So when I moved to Reno, the cost of living was so cheap. I only worked 6 days a month. I think I did say that. But anyway, so I went back to working 3 days a month. But I was just like, I'm used to grinding. I'm used to working like 5 days a month. And so I started looking for a second job so I can cover all these expenses, because once I was in Reno, I also actually went back into more debt, growing my business. The working 6 days a week covered all my expenses, but it wasn't enough for me to grow my business like I wanted to at that time. So I did take on some debt to grow my business. And that debt, you guys, was making me so uncomfortable, on top of the fact that I was paying a mortgage and rent. So I was like, I got to hustle, you guys. I got to grind. I mean, I know how to do it. I could just find another job. It's easy to find a job in nursing, especially being a labor and delivery nurse. I am in high demand. And the place that I really, really, really wanted to work, I got a full-time job there, but I wasn't ready to give up my full-time job where I was working, because all the benefits are under me. I don't ever want to be in a position where my kids don't have insurance. So basically what I did was commit to working 6 days a week. And so I was like, okay, I can do this temporarily for 2 months or so. And then when I figure out if I really, really like this job and everything is working out, then I'll drop down at my previous job just to be in per diem, which means that I only have to work 5 shifts a month. And so I was committed. I was hustling, and, I went through the process, got onboarded, fully hired, went through, all of my physical, drug testing, all that stuff that I had to do. And then a couple days before I was going to start my orientation, I had a total meltdown. You see, orientation coincided with my daughter's first day of school. And when I tell you, my baby cried so hard when I told her I wasn't going to be there for her on her first day of school. As a matter of fact, by taking this job, because they wanted me to work day shift, I would hardly ever see my kids. I would have to be at work, like leave the house at 5:30 in the morning. I probably wouldn't get back until about 8:30 at night. My kids are young. They they sleep a lot. I would never see my kids. I mean, and for me at first it was okay, because I was like, it's just going to be 2 months. But I couldn't do it, you guys. I couldn't do it. I came to the point where I had to realize that it's okay to just step back and take my time, pay the stuff off, and not sacrifice the time that I have now with my daughters. Because you guys, actually, the way that I'm working right now feels amazing. Working 3 days a week, I'm able to pick my kids up from school and daycare, see them every day, spend time with them, help them with homework. I'm able to do stuff with my business. Like, things are good. The only thing that's missing is now I'm not that nurse that makes $230,000 a year. And for a long time, that had been my identity. And though I'm not comfortable being on the margins of how much I make, like, I couldn't be that nurse that made $14 an hour. It makes me super uncomfortable. But I really had to come to grips that I don't have to earn a lot in order to really really affect my finances. And so I said, well, I'm just going to grind, make sure I cut my expenses down, work with what I got. And actually, just last week when I was at FinCon, and this is going to be a couple of weeks from when this episode is airing, but my house finally sold. And with those proceeds, I was able to pay off my remaining debt minus my car. And so I'm now back debt free minus my car. So I'm not completely debt free. I'm never going to say that. But it feels so freeing. And now the majority of my paycheck is going to fully funding my 403B, and I do have access to a 457. So I'm funding that. I'm back funding my daughter's college funds. I have maxed out my Roth IRA, and things are starting to be on the up and up. You've been listening to Nurses on Fire. If you want to learn more about me or my guests, check out our show notes page. If you found value, please support our show by supporting our sponsors and affiliate, also listed in the show notes. If you like what you're hearing, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whatever podcast app you're using to stream this show. You guys, tell all the nurses in your life to subscribe. And if you know a nurse with a compelling money story and would like me to feature them, shoot me an email at Naseema@financiallyintentional.com. All right, y'all. Much love and keep them fires blazing. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Like I said, I did make a couple of mistakes in there that I want to correct. So oops. I said hecka authoritatively that I contributed to my daughter's 401k. I wish she had a 401k, but I meant 529. So I contributed to her 529. And then also, I always do this in real life, without being on the podcast. I always interchange how many days a week and month that I'm working. So just to clarify, when I moved to Reno, I was working 6 days a month. When I moved to Oakland, I was working 3 days a week. When I was considering taking that second job, that would have put me at working 6 12-hour shifts per week, which is why I was having a hard time processing that, and I had that huge struggle. So I could have, and I have worked like that, but the way my life is currently set up, it's less about the hustle and grind, and it's more about being intentional about the time that I get to share with my family. Everything else will fall into place. So instead of doing my nursing notes this week, I want to talk to you about some financial mistakes that I have made. Yes, guess what, you guys? I'm not perfect. I make financial mistakes, but the beauty of having this platform is that I get to share them with you so that hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes as I did. So moving 3 times. I have moved 3 times in the last 2 years is hella expensive. It has set me back in so many ways. Security deposits, moving, just paying movers, downtime in packing and unpacking, buying the house and all the cost to sell the house, the cost to buy the house. It's hella expensive, you guys. And so I could have been putting that money into investing into my kids' college funds, into other things. But, we had reasons why we moved every time. We did not project that we would move so much, but damn, moving is hella expensive. That is something that I don't necessarily want to have to do for a good while. Another mistake that I made was borrowing from my retirement fund. So I have a 403B, and when I moved, I was so deathly afraid of, not afraid, but it just really pissed me off when I was living in my house, my big house that I sold because I had FHA loan. I was paying MIP, which is mortgage insurance, and MIP is for FHA loans versus PMI, which is for a conventional loan. But anyway, I was paying the MIP and it was like $700 a month. So I was so burnt out on that. I did not want to take a loan where I had to put less than 20% down. Therefore, having that expense that was so unnecessary. So I was just like, by any means necessary, I want to put 20% down. And because I didn't have enough saved necessarily at that point for that, I borrowed a little bit against my 403B. And it wasn't necessarily that it was a major mistake to do that. And I think there's reasons to do that if you have to. But I didn't really have to. And, the fear there is always that, you don't know what's going to happen. You could lose your job. And with a 403B loan, as soon as you separate from the institution where you have that 403B loan, like if I would have lost my job or not gone back for any reason, that loan is immediately due. And so that made me really uncomfortable. And it wasn't because I feared like I was going to lose my job, but when I had the postpartum depression after having my baby, I was questioning whether I was going to have the mental capacity to go back to work. And so that made me super uncomfortable when I was like, that loan could come due if something were to happen, which thank God was not the case. But just being in that place made me feel super uncomfortable. And then I really loved the house that we had in Reno, but in hindsight, buying the house was a major mistake because like I said, we had the expenses of buying the house that you never recoup, the expenses of selling the house that aren't easily recoupable. And I could have rented in Reno. We could have rented in Reno for much, much less. So, that was a huge mistake, and we could have saved, and I could have had that money that I pulled out of my 403B working for me. And so I do regret that, but hindsight is 2020. Another big lesson I learned is that I'm super uncomfortable with debt. I don't think I will be taking on any more debt to grow my business. Thank God it's totally paid off now. I mean, it wasn't even a year that I had the debt, but still it made me uncomfortable. And so I know that debt is not something that I'm comfortable using in financing my company. I would rather just work an extra shift and put cash towards my investment. So I hope there are some takeaways and some lessons that you guys learned from my mistakes, from what I've been going through on my journey, and I'll continue to share with you the lessons that I learned along the way. Again, you guys, I am nowhere near perfect, but what I am willing to do is always share with you so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I've made.
Thank you for listening to my mommy's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye-bye.